Hello everyone and welcome back to the Retro Recall. I hope you're doing awesome. Today we have another exciting video for everybody on the Retro Recall. We have a whole bunch of different components laying around on the bench that I'd like to put together and build, that's right, a custom PC for everyone today. I just loved doing this back in the day. I loved getting a whole bunch of different components, sourcing whatever you could find, whether it was from an old tower or something new in a box, and putting it all into a system. So, you know what? We have lots to do for everybody here. Let's relive back as if it was the late 90s. Let's get right to it. And we're back. And before we start to assemble all these amazing components, let's go over all of them just to see what we have. So the first thing we're going to do is go over the motherboard itself. And this is a motherboard that I had featured in a separate video when we had done a motherboard testing video. And this motherboard is the AOPEN AX59 Pro, AX59 Pro motherboard, which is just an absolutely beautiful motherboard. We have, the ability to use two different types of RAM. You have your 72-pin SIM and your SD RAM here. We're going to be using SD RAM today. You have your ATX power supply connection with a floppy drive connector and two IDE ports here. We have AGP, PCI, and ISA, giving you that support for a whole different variety of cards. And I just love this motherboard for this. And this is a Super Socket 7 motherboard, and the processor that we're going to be utilizing today, see if I can get that on camera, probably can't because of the lighting, but it is an AMD K6 2450 CPU. I was never a huge fan of the AMD processors when I was doing this years ago. Again, just having this in the collection, I figured, you know what, instead of it sitting out on the bench or doing nothing, let's put it into an actual build and see what it's like. So we do have that motherboard all ready to go in, and we have tested this on the channel already, so we know that motherboard works. We have a floppy drive here, just your standard 3.5-inch floppy. I have an X on it. I'm not convinced that the drive is dead. I believe I had put the X on it before because of another build, but I think it was because of a floppy cable, not the actual drive. And then for the hard drive, everyone knows I love the metal physical hard drives. We have a Seagate Metalist 4321 hard drive here right in front of us. It is a 4 GB model, so I have a 4 gig with a check mark, so it's been tested with a little happy face here, so it's a happy drive. And we have all the parameters in case we need it, but definitely awesome to have. I figure that's more era specific. Even a 2 GB one would be. The next one I have in terms of size above that would be a 40 or a 30 gigabytes. So definitely nice to have that. And then we have an ATX power supply here. I believe this is a 430 watt power supply. I've tested the power supply already, but I do have my tester to test one more time just to be absolutely sure we're good to go. And then in terms of the optical drive, I was kind of debating what to do. Do I put a burner in here? Do I just put a CD-ROM drive in here? I think for today's build, we'll just put a CD-ROM drive. So I have a 48-speed CD-ROM drive that's right here, which is kind of generic, just a blank faceplate. But then I found this Creative 52-speed, and I love Creative Labs. I loved all their equipment growing up. Definitely want to, use that drive. So we'll probably end up doing that. Okay, and then we have some memory. There's currently a 64 meg chip of RAM that's in there now. We have a 256 megabyte chip here that we can use as well. So yeah, we'll end up swapping out the 64 for one 256. Yes, you can do more expansion. We can actually use both if we wanted, but I think for Windows 98 second edition, which is what I'm going to be putting on this system, I figured, 256 is more than enough to do what we needed to do. Okay, and for a video card here, we have the Voodoo 3 2000 AGP card. So definitely a nice card. This card was from 1999, I believe. And again, just beautiful card for, for the era for this system. I think that's going to be pretty awesome to have in the system to test a couple games. And then, of course, we have the beautiful Sound Blaster 16 card in the ISA format. And again, perfect motherboard to support these range of cards. We also have a socket 7 CPU, heatsink, and fan. We'll use some good old thermal grease there as well before we put that on the CPU. And then we also have a beautiful 3-COM Etherlink 10100 card here, the PCI card for Ethernet. So I think that that's going to be pretty awesome in case we want to do any sort of networking with this computer. And, you know, I'm future-proofing this basically by putting this in here as opposed to just leaving it out. So I may as well do it during the actual build itself. We have some IDE cables, floppy cables, we have some screws, and we have a screwdriver, of course, for everything there. We have a coin cell battery. We have a USB mouse here as well, a Microsoft IntelliMouse here as well. We have the BIOS update, the AX59 Pro BIOS version 2.36 update. So we'll be doing that as well just to get that board up to date. And then we have a Windows 98 boot disk. Oh, can't forget the massive elephant in the room. That's right. That is a full tower that I have that was donated to the channel. You know what? I've just been sitting there for almost a year now, just literally sitting there going, you know, what are we going to do with that tower? And I just said, you know what? It just screams a 90s PC. I said, you know what? We're going to do that. So here we are. We have all the stuff to do it. So the first thing we're going to do is get the bench all cleaned up here now that we've gone through all the components. We're going to get the computer on its side and get the case all ready to go to start accepting all the hardware. So let's get right to it. Okay, here we are all set up on the bench. Hopefully the lighting's okay for everybody. It's kind of tough with this such a big case. It's actually out of frame a little bit here, but we'll work with what we have. So the first thing we're going to do is just look at the case itself. So, I mean, you can see that we have a couple spare fans for extra cooling in this case. So we have one up top here, we have another one here, and we have another one in the front here that just below the speaker here, that the previous owner would have had 3 case fans for this. And, you know, that's going to be really good for ventilation. Does this system need that? Probably not. With the amount of real estate that it has in here, natural dissipation would probably be just fine. You know, if we can hook up 1 or 2, we definitely will, but not interested in trying to make the case any noisier than it needs to be. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is just look at the standoffs here. And one thing I'll mention is I do not have the IO shield that's supposed to go on the back here. I have ordered one for this. It just wasn't here in time, unfortunately, but it is on its way. So it's unfortunate I don't have it, but you know, it is what it is. It's not going to affect anything for now. Just be mindful of when you're plugging in peripherals and things like that. Just adds an extra layer of protection there. Okay, so I see in the top here, we have one standoff here, and we need another standoff right here where it says, this should be absolutely sure to line it up. Yeah, where it says 13, so we'll put one in there. I mean, this is a fairly straightforward process as long as you have the right tools. I just have a proper screwdriver that's designed for this, so it just tightens it right down. There we are. Okay, so we have that in there now, and if we're looking again, we see over here that there's one extra kind of in the middle here. So I'm going to just leave the motherboard there for a moment, and we'll go ahead and remove one of these guys here, and we'll move it down. I mean, may as well reuse what we have here. So we know that that works anyway. There we are. We have it out. We'll put it in number 10 here, and we'll screw it down as well. There we are. We have that in there, and we'll do the same here. We'll lift it back up. So we have the top 2 in there, and we have the 2 side ones now. Now let's look at the back of the motherboard here. So it looks like we have a spare one here. So we're just going to remove that completely. So we have here on the side, we have the 1 here. We have 2 here. But we're missing one down here on where it says number 10 to line up with the other ones that are there. So we'll put that in there as well. And then we'll just lay the motherboard in just to make sure that the motherboard lines up with all of the standoffs. Very important you do this. Very important you have them. There's not any extra laying around underneath just in case they touch any of the metal parts and cause a short. I think we are in good shape there. I'm just going to line up the motherboard here. Now, again, I'm a little disappointed I don't have the IO shield there just because I like that firm kind of fit in there when you go to do this. Just because of what we have for now, that's what we have to do. Okay, let me get some screws here to be able to put this in. And it's very important that when you're putting the screws in here, when I screw this in here, I always just leave it loose enough, just a little bit, just to make sure that I have, you know, a little bit of flexibility to kind of shift the motherboard around as I need to line everything up. And then at the end, you can tighten up. And again, you don't need to force this. This is not something you need to reef on too hard. You just need to literally thumb tight when you go to tighten them. Not a big, doesn't require a lot of tension there. We got 2 more to go here, and then we'll be in a good shape. But see, the motherboard shifts around in here. Well, it's a little too tight here. There we go. There we go. Perfect. It should be pretty straightforward to do this. You shouldn't have to force anything when you're building a computer, especially when you're dealing with those type of components. You just want to make sure everything is good. So I'm just going to go and tighten all these up. And again, as I mentioned earlier, just thumb tight is perfect. So next thing we're going to do is I'm going to pop out the sticker RAM that's in here now, and I'm going to utilize some contact cleaner just to make sure that we have that in there. Well, maybe we'll do all the slots just for there. And I'm going to get the other sticker RAM, and okay, we'll pop that in. It's fairly straightforward, nothing fancy here. And this is our 256 megabytes of memory that we have. And I'm just lining it up with the slot to make sure it's good, and we'll pop it in. There, perfect. You can hear it clip in nicely there, and we're good to go. And that's nice and solid in the case. The next thing I'm going to do, and usually this is the last thing I do because I always forget, not because I don't want to do it last, but we're just going to pop in a new coin cell battery now, because if I don't, I will forget. And it's right here right now. And okay, we're going to pop that in. We're good. There we are. So we have the coin cell replaced, and we have the memory in as well. So next logical thing is to get the CPU cooler on. So I'm going to get some of the thermal grease here. Okay, and for thermal grease, I am using the MX4 compound, thermal compound by Arctic. It works really, really well. We don't need a whole lot of it on here. We have that on there now. So what we're going to do, and we're going to pop on the CPU cooler, and there's built-in heatsink on this. So we have that in there now. And then for the power for this particular unit, it utilizes the actual power supply itself. So we don't have anywhere on the motherboard to plug that into. But that does free up the ability to use one of the fan connections here if we want to pop, say, for example, this one, just because it's right next to the power supply area, that we can pop that on there, and boom, we now have a case fan, just like that, because it had extra ones in there. So before I, go to actually do that, I'm going to get the power supply all installed. Try to do some kind of cable management here with some ties and things like that, just to kind of get things kind of cleaned up. Okay, I think the next thing we need to do is pop in that power supply, just because it's right there. Okay, so with the power supply all installed here, no problems. That's good. And yeah, you can easily route all of the wiring where it needs to be. And I also do like that it's we have it cleaned up pretty well there. I'm going to test that power supply real quickly. Just going to plug in the power here, and we'll get our power supply tester here. Pop that in there as well. There we are. Everything is looking absolutely beautiful there. Perfect. Okay. Fan's going fine. Power supply tester works great. Okay, so we'll turn that off. It's always good to do that check, the confirmation. I have had the unfortunate experience of damaging one of my boards from a bad power supply, which worked just fine previously to that. It is what it is. So we'll have to work on that board in the future. So the next thing we're going to do is, because we're going to be putting a hard drive in here as well, I'm going to free up, I'm going to leave one of these free. Actually, the nice thing about this adapter, it allows you to put it through as a pass-through. So let's do that right now. Okay, and we have now, we have the two anyway, but for the hard drive and the floppy drive will go here. So we'll have that all kind of sorted out there. Next steps now is to, let's get the hard drive and floppy drive installed next. Okay, first we have our Seagate hard drive here, and we're going to put it down in this bottom area here, mainly because of the 2 floppies can go up top here, and I don't want to do anything to affect that. Yeah, I'll put all 4 in here. I'm just going to flip the case around a little later to do that. There we have one side of the drive installed. And then, so with the floppy disk, so we have the front of the bezel off as well, and we also have the little metal punch out, because again, the user indicated he used the case, but he hadn't put any optical or any floppy disk drives in there. So we'll have to do that. Then we're modifying the case for our use. Okay, so we'll pop the floppy disk drive in there as well, and we'll line it up on the front. It's always difficult depending on the case because of the size of it there, and I think, yeah, I did. I just dropped a screw down the side, so we'll have to get that out of there as well. Okay, there's screw number 2. So before we screw down the other side of this by flipping the case, taking the side off, flipping around on the other side, we're going to continue installing the rest of the items, because I'm not going to go through all that work of doing that until for sure that we're good there. So I want to make sure that the the hard disk cable going to the CD-ROM drive is going to work. Because of the size of the case height, I don't know if I have floppy cable unless I went independent floppy cables, which actually I might end up doing. I might put a separate floppy cable just for this, and then my longer one going up here, because I like to have the optical drive up higher if I can, but we're going to go ahead and get that sorted out now. Okay, so we have the drive punch out here moved out of the way, so that's good, and we have our front bezel. And I always keep these because you never know when you're going to swap them out, especially if you have a new tower case or a new case to be able to do this in. So we have our 52-speed Kratom Labs drive here. I just love the look of this drive. I'm going to slide that in the front and pop it into where it needs to be. Now for this, I just put in screws, 2 screws per side. I know it has 4. And I just put them on the diagonal here. Make sure we're all lined up. Yeah, we are. But yeah, I just put them on the diagonal. It's fine. The same thing on the other side. That's all you need. Now, before I go to do anything else, I'm going to go and flip around the case, take off the other side panel, get the other screws all installed, and then be right back, all flipped back around. And we have the screws on the other side. So the next thing we're going to do is, what we should do is get the optical drive connected to the IDE controller first. Again, just because of the length that we need to go through here. I'm going to be using IDE 2 for this, not IDE 1, naturally because the hard drive is going to be that. So we'll pop that in here. And we're just going to run it up here because it's such a far way to go up there. And that's why I'm doing it separately, because if I had done it the other way, then, and actually, you know what? I have to change the jumper on this drive. So the optical drive right now I have set to slave, and now I'm going to get it set up for master here. And that's important because, it would work as slave, no problem by itself, but I just like, for the sake of doing it right, make sure it's done right. So, okay, so we have that on there. And now for power, unfortunately, it just doesn't reach close enough there. And I don't want to do any damage to these wires. Let's see what we have available down here. So if I have that, and no, see, that won't reach either. Okay, so we're gonna have to cut the end off there and retie it to clean it up. Okay, there we are. Nothing too difficult there. So red to red, got that in there. There we are. We have the power connected to the optical drive up top. And then down here, we're gonna make sure that we'll get the floppy cable installed next. So again, just by looking at the cable, and oddly enough, that the connector for the floppy is on the opposite side of the board. So we have that connected in there. Okay, perfect. Okay, so we have all that together, and I'm going to do something there to kind of keep all this away from I don't like where that is around the CPU fan. The design of this, I'm telling you, is crazy. I could just probably put it over here, but again, I'm utilizing part of that here. So we'll see what we can do. But, it's the problem with these older systems. SATA was obviously much cleaner as you went because you didn't have these big ribbon cables kind of hanging out. But again, we'll do what we can as we go. Just get some of these panel connectors out of the way. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is connect the other IDE cable. Of course, we don't need a big one, but that's all we have is this one here. So we'll put this in here as well. So now we do have that extra Molex here. I know we do because of the fan. We have that connected. So we have power and data, power and data, and power and data to all 3 of our devices here, which is perfect. Before I start to clean up all this stuff, because goodness knows I want to, it's going to be let me do our best to kind of clean it up the way we can as we go, because there's not a lot of lead stretch on here. And if you're looking at this thinking there's lots of room, it's not. This is the length of the cable. That's just something tied to that main cable. The 4-pin is tied to it. So that doesn't give us a lot of room over there. I could go up and around like that, but again, we're blocking some airflow from this fan over here too if I run it that way. So I'm just trying to think of a better way to do that. But regardless, we need to test the system before we get ahead of ourselves and start tying everything up, only to cut it out if I have to replace any of those. Let's get this punch out of the way here, because the next thing we're going to do is install the graphics card. So we'll slide our graphics card in like this, the Voodoo 3 2000 AGP. There we are. I'm glad we put that coin cell battery in, because look, we're covering it up now. I would have done that before, but I would have forgotten it. So we would have had to take it out again. Okay. So I'm just going to put that screw in there. There we are, nice and tight. I just love that card that's in there nicely. And then I'm going to give some space here. So the next card that we're going to put in is going to be the 3Com card. and that one there is a PCI card. So I want to give it some space there. There's a lot to be said about toolless cases, you know, the designs that you don't need to screw or screwdriver to do any of this. But you know what? It's just good to, sometimes it's just good to use the good old fashioned screws and make sure everything's secure and not going anywhere. Okay, and then we have our Sound Blaster 16 card. We're going to pop in the bottom ISA slot. So I'm just giving lots of room to the cards just so we have adequate cooling, ventilation around them. That's just something that I do, but again, to each their own, of course. Okay, so we have our sound card, we have our PCI card for our 3Com or internet, or Ethernet, sorry, I should say, and then we have our Voodoo card here as well. Too bad I don't have I might actually have a bracket for here. I like to keep that clean and closed, just because, you know, for any dust and dirt and all that, it's just good to close up your sides there. Now, I know that's well, not completely, but slightly irrelevant, seeing how we don't have a IO shield there. But again, I'm getting one, and then I know I'll have to take this out to put it together, but it'll be worth it when it comes in. So the next step, now that we have everything kind of connected and the board in and this mess of wires, we're going to go and get this front panel, all these front panel connected here. And so in order for me to do that, I need to get the manual and find out what that is. Okay, so we have the front panel connectors all connected, and we also have another CPU fan assembly down here. So I use that header for the front fan that's here. So we have fan here, we have fan down here, and then we have this regular power supply fan up top here. And I figured, you know, if we had it, we use it. So we have 2 of the 3 fans that are connected. The third fan that's up top, I just kind of tied the wire up so it's out of the way. I'm not doing anything with this just yet. I want to make sure that when I turn this on, everything just fires up and we get post. If we don't, I'm going to have to leave the side panel off and do some troubleshooting to get that going. So the next step here is to get the bench all cleaned up, because there's quite a mess over here, and get the massive tower, full-size tower stood up, and get a keyboard, mouse, and monitor on the bench. So here we go. Let's see if all of our work paid off here. And we're back. Isn't that an amazing looking system right there? Look at the sheer height of this full tower chassis with everything installed. That creative drive looks absolutely wonderful. I'd love to have the name in the front. We have our monitor set up that we've seen a million times on the channel. We have an IBM keyboard and our Microsoft mouse. I could have gone HP for those 2 guys, but yeah, I wanted the Microsoft mouse to go with this tower, and I figured a beige PS2 keyboard would fit the bill on this one as well. Okay, so we are ready to actually turn on the power for the system. So let's go ahead and do that now. Cross your fingers. CD-ROM's loading up. Do we have post? We do not have post. So I'm going to do some troubleshooting. My thoughts are it's the RAM. It's always the RAM on this channel. All right, I'm going to go test the RAM out, and we'll be right back. Okay, here we are. And sure enough, RAM. It's always RAM. That stick of RAM that I had must be bad. I tried many different ways, couldn't get it working. I popped another 256 stick in there, instantly did this, and we have post. Oh, memory on this channel, I don't know. Okay, so we have version 2.34 on the BIOS that I'm seeing here. I'm just going to pause, and I have 2.36, and that's the latest. So I don't know if this has already been updated to a more recent version or not, but yeah, definitely interested to upgrade that if that's the case. I don't know what the differences would be between the 2 versions. And so we have our K6 450 CPU found, which is awesome, running 256 megs of RAM, not gigs, megs. I can remember that. Then we found our hard drive, no problem. Our Seagate. Now let's continue on. Hit enter and make sure it detects our primary slave there. It did. It said default loaded CMOS battery failed. We're going to enter setup just to make sure we get everything configured, because again, we do have the new CMOS battery that's in there, the coin cell. Okay, I'm going to go into standard setup. So everything's set to auto. I don't have to worry about any of that. So I'm going to change all this to what it should be. Okay, we have the data all changed. I'm doing a setting, save and restart here. Okay, and we're back, and we have the computer posting yet again, and on a different angle this time. I figured we would get the full height tower in the frame because I just absolutely love this case. So there was an issue with the memory, as I alluded to a moment ago. And in between takes, I definitely had quite a bit of back and forth to get the RAM working. And the other thing I did to get it going is I alluded earlier that I would have flashed the BIOS with the upgraded version of 2.36. I believe it was 2.34 or something similar to that. I don't remember anymore until I go through editing, but it is now updated to our 2.36, which is 2002 date versus the 2000 date. So we do have the system set up properly now and updated properly now, which is great. Okay, so we have that done. We're all ready to go. We're going to pop in the Windows 98 boot disk here, and we'll get everything sorted out as we go. So let's get right to it and get Windows 98 2nd Edition installed on this beautiful machine. Okay, here we are at the Windows 98 desktop, the beautiful desktop that is absolutely timeless. And as you can see, we have the timeless process of trying to get all the drivers installed. And yes, there's many different ways you can do that via, different types of driver packages, but I'd like the old-fashioned way of installing what we need to do to get them done individually. So I am mentioning that the 3COM Fast Etherlink XL drivers are already installed as part of the operating system. It detected the sound card here. I didn't hear any sound on the system, so I might have it plugged in the wrong jack in the back, and we have a couple of unsupported devices, which we're going to find out here shortly. But so we have the AMD K6 3D processor running 256 megabytes of memory, Windows 98 2nd Edition. That looks really good. And under display adapters, I expected our Voodoo 3 2000 not to be detected. So before we do anything else with any of that, well, a common practice I like to do is copy over the Windows 98 folder from the actual CD-ROM drive over to the hard drive. That way, if there's any sort of stuff that's requiring, as you're using the computer, requiring the CD for any reason, you can actually just point it to this directory here on the hard drive. You don't have to go and dig out the CD-ROM drive every time. At least that's my general practice. Anybody else can obviously do their own thing, but this is just something I like to do. And especially if I have a 4 gigabyte hard drive, back in the day, 4 gigabytes, you'd never fill it. And here we are, right? So I want to get this kind of copied over, and then that frees up anything to do with the Windows CD, and we can start to work on the actual drivers. So let's continue on here, and we will move on to the next step. Okay, now that we have the data copied off the drive there, just the Windows 98 folder, we'll move on to the actual drivers themselves. So I was able to get the majority of the drivers from Phil's Computer Lab. His website is absolutely beautiful, and I will definitely tag it down below. That way everybody knows where to get some of the drivers for this. So, okay, we're just loading up the drive here, or the disk in the drive, and there we go. We have our drivers. So we're going to start with the 3DFX Voodoo 3 installer here. This is directly from Phil's Computer Lab, and so I do trust that the drivers will be fine for this computer and this setup. Here we are with the installer automatically resuming. And this is for the Voodoo 3 2000 card that we have in the system. We of course accept all the terms, and to begin installation, click on install. Here we are. I will say that the system is pretty snappy with that K6 450 in it and 256 megabytes of RAM. Definitely no shortage of speed, even with that physical hard disk. And I just love hearing the sounds from the actual hard drive itself. It's just really nostalgic for me, for sure. I just love how it automatically detects the card. And I mean, that's the nice thing about a plug and play card and the actual right installation software. And again, getting it from the website was awesome as a package. And so it automatically detected the card and it looks like it installed it. No doubt it'll ask to restart one more time, but that's totally fine. I think that's our best practice to do. Sure enough, it does. So we'll click on yes, and we'll be back to the Windows desktop in a moment. Okay, we have the Windows desktop loading back up here, and the colors look absolutely amazing now compared to what they were. We're still missing the sound, but we'll address that in a moment. And here we are. Let's just make sure that we have the Voodoo 3 2000 card installed correctly. It should install, I believe, some applications. There we go. Sure enough. Down below, show a little icon next to the speaker. We'll close off that and go back into the device manager just to be absolutely sure it has installed. And yeah, that's just a great sight to see in this computer. I just love the system. I love the tower. I love the look of it. When I was younger, I always wanted a full tower, but I couldn't justify the cost at the time or the reason why or the space. But heck, years later, I can justify anything. For CD-ROM drive, we have our creative CD-ROM drive in there, the 52-speed max drive, so that's great. And then we have generic drives, but we know it's a 4 gig drive that we have installed. And so everything's looking good so far. Internet connection sharing is showing little asterisks because we don't have the network set up right now, but that's fine. Other devices, so unsupported devices, I imagine this has something to do with the other things that are missing from the contributing to the sound card working. So I'm going to go back into our driver CD and just look to see what else we have left to install here. And we have the 3coms installed, 3DFX is installed. We have the BIOS update installed. So we're just left with our Sound Blaster 16. So I'm going to work on that, get that up to date, and we should be good to go. Okay, after some determination and some more troubleshooting, that's the nice thing about, the thing you encounter about these older computers, that you run into these sort of thing, and you have to expect that, right? And you just kind of learn as you go. With the sound card, I updated, the drivers and to the Sound Blaster 16 drivers that I had from Phil's Computer Lab. And I mean, they installed no problem, detected no problem, restarted no problem, but there's still no sound. So, good old contact cleaner to the rescue. All it was generalized oxidation inside the speaker port. So after getting that all cleaned out, we now have sound. The good old Windows 98 startup sound. Again, never gets old at all. Okay, so now we have the... oh, there we are. Totally forgot about that. Those coming on. You think I'd know that? Okay, enough of that. Let's close that. All right, so we have our Windows desktop here, and it looks like we have all the drivers installed. Now, for full transparency, and this is something that I'll deal with later. So under Device Manager, there's still a couple unknown devices that are showing here, unsupported device, not knowing what they are. Everything seems to be working just fine. My guess is that there's something to do with system devices down here that are missing. So, it's always important to have all the drivers installed as you go. So I will get one of the drive utilities, which will do a search or scan on the system, pick out what those drivers are. Snappy Driver Installer is something that is very popular right now and seems to be working quite well. So I'll do that on here and get those installed. But for the sake of today's video and the scope of what we're trying to do, we have a working operating system running on our custom full tower, given the scale, of the K6 2450. So I think that's running fantastic. Okay, so now that we have that installed, I think it's it'd be good to put some games on here and try them out. Let's go do that right now. And here we are back with our completed system, our custom full tower AMD K6 450 system, and I just love it. Going from all the parts that we had on the bench all the way to a complete nostalgic 90s computer. And I just think this is absolutely beautiful. I just love doing these sort of things. I love the results of these things, taking, you know, what you think, what you'd like to build. And there's so many different options to build through so many different configurations. And the K6 450 processor is definitely not disappointing. With 256 megs of RAM for Windows 98 second edition, along with a 4 gigabyte physical hard drive clicking away in there, and it's working just fine. I'm particularly impressed by the sound with the Sound Blaster 16 that we have. Classic, with that awesome A-Open motherboard that supports PCI, AGP, and ISA. Just a well-rounded board with the beautiful pairing of the processor, the RAM, the hard drive, and that amazing 3DFX Voodoo 3 2000 video card. What more could you ask for? This is absolutely awesome. Truly a great gaming rig for back in the day. That said, if you liked today's video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification button, change it to all. You'll be notified when I make new content such as this. And comment down below. I respond to all the comments. Everybody, love the interaction on the channel. always making new content. Hope you enjoyed today's video. We'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.